Hero points are one of those things in Pathfinder that, and if you excuse the pun, can really save the day. My name is Don. I'm trying to be the Sly Strategist, and let's go ahead and get into it. So, a hero point is a fortune effect. It grants you good fortune for a specific instance, and it lets you recover from the brink of death, literally. The good thing about fortune effects is they are given to you by your GM, usually once per session, although they can be given for any specific acts of heroism, good role play, or even situations that increase the enjoyment of the party. They can be given out, and they are allowed to give you a fortune effect that allows you to basically re-roll or bring your character from dying back to stabilized. So they're pretty powerful, pretty good things to have. They do not take an action, and they can be used even if there's no other way for you to act, such as you being unconscious or in the dying condition. So hero points, per rules as written, last only for one single session, but that is up to the GM discretion. In truth, in most sessions that I've played, the hero points have rolled over. Once again, if you're doing rules as written, then they generally expire at the end of the session and a new one comes into effect during the next session. But that is purely up to your GM and your party's and your table's rules. So a hero point can be used generally under two conditions. And the first one is we'll talk about is to re-roll any check. So when we say any check, we literally mean any check. Anytime you roll a d20 and it is compared against a DC value, that can be used for a reroll for the hero point. However, when you do use it, you have to use the second result. This isn't like some of the other things like Halfling Luck where you can choose which roll to take. If you roll the first time, and even if the second time is worse than your first, you still have to take the second effect. It also cannot stack with other fortune effects. So in mentioning Halfling Luck, there's also another good, fairly common one in True Strike. Those are both fortune effects, and you cannot use both on the same dice roll or check, however you want to classify that, be it the dice roll or the check itself. But you can only use one fortune effect. And if there is a standing fortune effect, then it can only be one or the other, and you would have to choose. On the other side of the coin, if there were two misfortune effects, it would be the GM's decision on which one to use, and usually picks the one that is worse for the player. But in this particular case, for the fortune effect, you have to choose which one you would use. You cannot use both on the same check. Once again, it is used anytime you roll a d20 against a difficulty class. The only thing that you can't really use it on are on secret checks. So the example in the book is that if you ingest poison and you fail a fortitude saving throw that the GM did in secret and you didn't know you ingested the poison, well, you can't use a hero point on that because you didn't know the secret check occurred. There are some secret checks that are used, such as like recall knowledge or a seek, where you can request using a hero point. But in general, if you did not know that the hero point could be used because you didn't know a roll was taking place, well, then it's really not available to you. It does not need to be cited before you roll. You can choose to pick this up after the roll was complete and you know you failed. One thing I will say is to always check to make sure you did fail, because if you decide to use the hero point, and as we stated before, if the second roll is worse, you have to use the second roll. There's no way around it, unfortunately. This also can be used on your familiar or an animal companion. And at any one time, you can only have 3. So it really doesn't pay to stack these up. And we're kind of going to get into that a little bit in the next section, which is the other case where you'd use a hero point, which is to bring yourself back from dying. You can also spend a hero point in order to avoid death. If you do, you expend all your hero points. So if you have 1, you can use that to bring yourself back from dying condition to stabilize at 0 HP. Or if you have 3, you have to use all 3 in order to come out of the dying condition and stabilize at 0 hit points. You don't get to choose to use just one. You have to expend all your hero points. So it really doesn't pay to kind of stock up on them. And also, depending on how the rules are played, like we said a little bit earlier in this video, is if they expire at the end of the session, it just pays to use them. You would generally declare this when your dying condition would increase. So it would be at the beginning of your turn within the initiative. And when you do this, you do not incur the penalty of stabilizing and having to transfer that to your wounded condition. The unfortunate thing is although it will not increase your wounded condition, it does not decrease a wounded condition you might have already had. So if this is like your second time that you've gone down and have been in the dying condition, it wouldn't remove that wounded one. It would only prevent you from having to go higher. And the other case where this wouldn't come into effect is instant death scenarios like massive damage or something that has the death trait. You won't be able to use a hero point to come back from that because you are not in the dying condition at that time. You are actually dead. So unfortunately, it won't really work for that. Now, rules as written, it is up to the GM to ensure that players have at least 1 point at the beginning of every session. They can give them out for various things, as we mentioned, like performing very well in combat, role-playing a scenario out very well, or potentially just causing joy or happiness at the table. They can be given out for various reasons. Additional hero points can be given out by the GM at any time. However, it is recommended in the book to at least give them out once per hour. Now, that isn't specifically to each character once per hour, but at least give out 1 hero point to 1 character per hour of playtime. And this is just to ensure that these things are circulated and they're being used. It's pretty powerful, and stockpiling them just doesn't seem to make any sense. The other thing that you could use a hero point for, and you could purchase this either physically on a PDF or actually in some of the virtual tabletops, is they do have hero point decks. So as opposed to just using it for a reroll or just using it in order to come back from dying, you can do certain very special activities that are a bit randomized because you're pulling them from a deck, but you could use your hero points on those, which kind of adds a little bit to it. Now, I do hope this little quick tip kind of helped you out and you might have learned something or maybe refreshed some information that you already had. I would appreciate it if you did like the video, if you liked or subscribed or hit the little notification bell, but it's not necessary. And even if you don't, I hope you have a good day and happy adventuring. Thanks.